In Bisbee, Arizona, in the 1900s, there was a mining dispute. On the one hand, there was a group of miners working in appalling conditions, and they were making demands to the mining companies. It placed the miners themselves in an invidious position. On the one hand, they could continue in these appalling conditions, or if they keep pushing the mining companies, they could end up unemployed and eventually in poverty. They were caught literally between a rock and a hard place. And in fact, that situation is the situation that generated the expression caught between a rock and a hard place. At the moment, globally, most of us are caught between a rock and a hard place. In the age of the virus, the prospect of death is very real. We know people who, as I speak, are suffering, who are ill, who are at grave risk. And it creates a dilemma. It creates a dilemma for most of us. The prospect of death, which reminds us of our own limits, our vulnerability and our frailty, can drive us in two directions. On the one hand, we can become paralysed with fear, consumed by it, chasing every detail about the virus, wanting to learn about every tragedy that leads to a state of paralysis. On the other hand, because of the prospect of fear, because of the prospect of this emotional, almost physical paralysis, we can become indifferent, almost blasé, particularly indifferent to the suffering of others. Now, I suspect, in fact, there is actually another choice. There is a third option. But I think we do well to explore this inherent ambiguity that is taking place in the world around us and in the neighbourhood in which we live. Today, within the Christian tradition, of course, it's Easter Day. And I don't feel like singing songs of cheer or sprouting triumphalist theology. Somehow, if we're going to say or discover anything meaningful today, it's about wrestling with the current situation, the situation that we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. In order to explore that situation, I want us to think for a moment about the God stuff, the God question. The way we understand God, the way that we interpret God has changed radically. Overall, I think it's been in the right direction. Since World War II and the Holocaust, triumphalist notions of God have largely been discarded. Of course, there are some places and some churches with vested interests in power who keep the old ways going. But for many of us, theologians and lay people alike, we have wanted to find a new God, a God who is intimately involved with us, a God who feels with us and for us. This yearning and searching for a different experience of God has only increased since 9/11, because we realise the complexities and frailties not only of the human situation, but of our countries and of our communities. And now, under the virus, our sense of human frailty has increased, and we are searching now for a God who is with us, who feels for us, who feels with us. Now, in recent weeks, during the season of Lent and moving into Holy Week, one of the important themes has been the Passion of Jesus. And the word passion itself is very interesting. It's got multiple meanings, and each of those meanings, I think, is relevant to our own situation. It has to do with suffer. If I feel passionate about something, I suffer for it. I'm willing to place myself in a situation of anguish to attain a certain goal or to fulfill a certain end. And we can look back on the ministry of Jesus and we can see those elements of anguish because of his commitment to love, because of his way of compassion. He was willing to suffer and endure things in order that others may know that love. But passion also has a sense of the word desire. occurs in sensual or erotic literature. It occurs in poetry. It occurs in song. We see that sense of desire which is celebrated. And that can be, in the right context and in the right relationship, a really good thing. So the word passion, it's a powerful word, and it's a word that has a sense of suffering. It's the word behind the word patient. Someone who is patient is able to suffer for something worthwhile, but it also has this sense of yearning and desire. So in recent weeks we've talked about the passion of Jesus, and it was his passion that led him to the cross. Ultimately, because he was so passionate about people, passionate about issues of poverty, passionate about issues of justice, that he upset the Romans and he was executed by them for being a subversive figure. He ended up on the cross because of his way of passion. Currently, we are caught between a rock and a hard place. And there are moments in my ordinary day where I experience elements of this sense of paralysis. You know, you flop in front of the television for the 5th time that day. You listen to the minutiae of the news reports, the terrible things taking place in New York, in Italy, what's happening with Boris Johnson. And after a while, it's hard to move. It's hard to think. On the other hand, in order to avoid that sense of paralysis, it's tempting then to become totally preoccupied with very ordinary things. And that's a good thing. You need to take a break. But it does run the risk of a certain kind of inertia or indifference, where we no longer feel about others. So in many ways, we are indeed caught between a rock and a hard place, between paralysis and indifference. But there is a third option, and it has to do with this image of the passion of Jesus and his passion for life. In recent weeks, we have been inspired by the most wonderful stories of firefighters, of people working in intensive care units, of doctors in Italy in tears for their patients and the suffering of their patients. We have been deeply moved by all sorts of people. And invariably, those people who have touched our hearts, who move us deeply, have this sense of a passion for life. It's not some kind of hope in an apocalyptic future. It's not some pious platitude or superficial theology. It's something that comes from the heart in the midst of situations of suffering. The passion for life which we displayed in people is not only a wonderful example, it's an invitation to us to live in a new way, so that each day is a gift. And with this passion for life, we have this sense that every moment has a certain kind of depth. We are no longer willing to take the superficial or to live on the surface. We want to explore the depth of our existence. Each day is a gift. We don't know what the future holds, but we have this day and we can choose to live it with passion. So I want to articulate 3 aspects of this passion for life, which I think in many ways captures the spirit of Easter. If the spirit of Easter is about anything, it's about the transformation of Jesus and a release or an encouragement to live in a transformative way. And that spirit of transformation, that spirit of resurrection, is captured by this sense of a passion for life. The 3 aspects that I want to focus on are that the passion for life has 3 important aspects. It's about will, it's about a passion itself, and it's about working and living for others. We as human beings, we're remarkable creatures. And we do have this sense of will. Sometimes it can manifest itself in stubbornness, just being, obdurate, sticking to our guns. But behind it, there's this gift, there's this will. Think of those emergency workers going into intensive care units. I'm sure every morning they wake up and they think to themselves, oh no, here we go again. But they make a conscious choice. They will themselves into life. They get in touch with the passion of their own sense of vocation and their care of others. There's something about the human will, even when we don't feel like it, even if we're not feeling particularly cheery or optimistic or hopeful. By engaging the will, we can live out that passion for life. The second aspect is passion itself. Passion is a gift of the Spirit that we all share. It's a wonderful gift. And some of the lighter moments of these days, we ought to celebrate life to its full extent in the little things. It might be walking out into the back garden and smelling the roses. It might be ringing up an old friend. It might be writing a poem or reading a book. All those are examples of the passion, the desire, the yearning that fills our lives and connects us with others. In other words, we accept the passion for life. We accept passion as a gift to be celebrated, honoured and encouraged. And the final thing is, ultimately, passion comes to its full life as we become caught up in the lives of others. We may not necessarily be working in intensive care units, but in some way or another, in various forms, we can connect to others. We can make an effort, using our will, engaging our passion, acting empathically, thinking of where others are and reaching out to them. It's Easter Day today, and it feels really strange. In the Christian tradition, it's a day of celebration, of joy. But in some ways that joy is appropriately muted today, as we understand there's a kind of waiting. But that waiting is not paralysis, nor is it indifference. We have been given this gift of a passion for life, this inherent gift. It's part of the human soul. It makes us human. It makes us one. It is a remarkable gift. Caught between a rock and a hard place. Invidious decisions to be made. But we can choose to live with a passion for life. A passion that blossoms, that transforms, that touches the lives of others. We can make that choice. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen. Let me close now with a reflection for the day. Intimate God, pushed to the limits, fearing the worst, we find you here. Loving God, hear our prayer. Passionate God, in Jesus, life is rekindled, flourishing as passion, living courageously in the name of love. Loving God, hear our prayer. Faithful God, renew your church, ground our leaders, strengthen our communities, fostering a passion for the life of your world. Loving God, hear our prayer. Immanent God, there are no easy answers, but there is love. In ghettos and emergency rooms, you are present in the anguish. Loving God, hear our prayer. Living God and God of life, may your passion inspire us to work as one for everyone, transcending race, religion, gender and sexuality, bringing new life to those on the edge, inaugurating Easter here and now. Loving God, hear our prayer.